In this video, we're going to create the style configuration system for our game.
Now, what is the style configuration system? That sounds complicated.
Well, style configuration is one more element to the style system that we have been putting together. Style, up until this point, has consisted of graphical and font assets. If you remember earlier in the project setup, we created a style folder within the content subproject.
Right.
And into that folder, we placed all of our game's graphics and the fonts that are going to be used.
Okay, now we're going to expand on that. In what way?
Well, some of the elements that we're going to position on our various screens, some of the elements we're going to put into the game itself, are going to need settings to describe where on the screen they're placed and what color is used to draw them.
And generally, to handle this, we're going to be creating an XML file that will contain a bunch of settings and then the necessary code in our game to read out that XML file and apply those.
Exactly, since in the previous video we went over and established the ability to load settings from a file, we'll apply the same technique to our style settings so that those settings can be changed outside of Visual Studio if need be. Also, we're going to put all of this together so that our new style configuration system will be packaged along into the same folder as all of the graphical assets.
Gotcha.
And that will make it easier to swap out entire styles. You could almost say a style is a skin at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It will make it so that we can easily swap out entire skins by working with everything at the folder level.
Now, primarily, we will be working with colors and positions here, right?
That's right. The actual configurable elements that we will address will be colors and positions.
Okay.
And
I guess the only other warning that I'd have before we get started is there will be a lot of typing here. But, I mean, you're trying to be a programmer, so...
That's right. What we're actually going to do is, this will differ a little bit from the config lessons, where in config we created just a handful of fields that we're going to immediately use, and then worried about all the supplementary subsystems that were needed. In the style configuration, we're actually going to lay out every single setting that we're going to need throughout the game. Now, we're not going to set up the actual values. We'll leave obvious defaults in place.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is, just to save ourselves time in the future, we'll lay everything out and kind of this will also give you a preview of what things that the style system is going to allow us to set.
Sounds good.
So that means we're going to set up things like how we want text positioned, various kinds of text, how we want some of the graphical staff to be drawn, and any additional positioning that needs to be used in our game screens.
All right. Well, let's roll.
All right. To begin with, let's start with the actual style configuration XML file itself. We'll go up here. We've already got our style folder expanded, so we will add a new item to style, and that is once again going to be an XML file. And we'll change the file name to style.xml. So once this loads up, we will pull out all of the asset compilation settings.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll drop out the XNA content root element, and we'll also go back to our style XML inside of the Solution Explorer and make sure that we change build action to none and copy to output to always, or rather copy always.
Okay.
Alright, now we can turn our attention back to the style XML file itself.
And I guess first you're going to set up some organization.
Right, because we're actually going to use some of these organizational sub-elements here to better organize all of our settings. We'll begin with the root node, though, which is simply going to be style. So we'll drop this in place, and in between style, we'll say that within this file, everything is relevant to the style, so therefore that will make up our root node.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to have two additional sublayers. These are going to be colors and positions. So we'll drop in colors first, and then after colors, we'll drop in a node layer called positions. And we'll drop this in, finish the tag off, and now we'll go back into colors, and this is the part where there will be a lot of typing, because we're going to go through all of these and fill them out. So
Right.
if things get repetitive, then a little bit of fast forwarding might be in order.
That shouldn't be too bad. You could probably use copy-paste for a lot of this.
Yeah, I will leverage copy-paste to get a lot of the initial work put in, but we're still going to have to go back and name everything. All right, let's put together the first color that we're going to have. The first color is going to be our background color. So I'll make a node. We'll call it background, and then we'll add an attribute to this node. We'll say that our value, so we have an attribute called value, and we'll set that to 0 by 0 by 0. So this will be a pure black color. Then we'll end off the node, and this is what the individual settings for the colors will look like. It'll simply be a name referencing a color. And you'll notice that the format that we place this color is actually the same as we had described in the configuration system, where we had made a function called parse color. So this will be placed in the same format because we're actually going to reuse that code.
So this information will actually be parsed by the parse color method that we wrote in the config class.
Right, since
Gotcha.
we've already established a small library of functions for reading different pieces of information. So we're
now you
simply
might
going
as well
to
use them.
we're going to leverage those same things.
Yeah.
All right, let's copy and paste this background node, and we'll make a new one. Now, before I get into the remaining specifics, we're going to set up almost what I'm going to call a copy and paste template. We're just going to call the name of this node temp, and we'll set the value to be pure yellow, or a red of 255 and a green of 255.
Okay.
And the reason I'm doing that is just to give an easy to copy and easy indicator to say that this one has not been set yet.
Okay.
So we'll go through here. Let me look over briefly and figure out exactly how many of these we need.
Counting lines of code in notes. So you're going to paste them all in and then rename them?
Yes, I believe we need 13 of these.
Okay. If you're wrong, you can add or remove as necessary. No big deal.
But this will basically get the amount that we need. So we've got our first one, so 13. And now we can go back in. So now all the repetitive stuff is out of the way. Establishing the tag, setting the default color of yellow.
Yeah.
And I will point this out also. We're going to leave any value that we do not immediately use set to yellow.
Okay.
The idea is that throughout the remaining lessons in the drum game, as we need individual style colors, we'll set them as we need them.
Okay.
That will make it easier to see exactly where that value is being used in the game.
Sure.
And it will also make it easier to find loading errors, because if we ever come across a color that's pure yellow, we're not going to use pure yellow in the game. So
Right.
that'll be an indicator that we failed to set one of our setting values.
Now, granted, I just wanted to throw this out there. This is all based off the notion that we kind of decided early on that the basic color theme of our game was going to be bluish. So if you're already thinking in the back of your head that your version of the drum game is going to be some sort of bright yellow, and for whatever terrible reason you want to assault someone's eyes like that, you might want to use a different default color than we did. This is just a simple example, nothing more.
All right, now that we've got the nodes themselves all placed in, let's go back and let's name all of these nodes. So the next one up is going to be called text normal. So this is one of one of a few variants of text. That'll be just any text that goes in menus and is not otherwise selected or part of another screen.
It's like your generic text on screen.
Exactly. All right, next up we've got text selected. This will be used in menus whenever you're selecting different elements or items on a menu. You will have a selected color to be in contrast to the normal color.
Pretty straightforward.
All right, next up we have text score. And this is going to be used on the score screen itself. The actual score values will be drawn using a different color. All right. Next up, we have text BPM.
That would be our tempo, I suppose.
And exactly, we'll use that on the game screen when we're drawing out the tempo value. All right, moving on, we now have the value for, I don't know, let's move down to track. And with track, this is just going to be the settings used for our graphical staff. Alright, moving on from here, we have track title. And track title is going to be a little piece of text that we add onto each individual track to say what drum it is. So we'll be able to visually see that, okay, this top track here is actually going to be the hi-hat. Alright, moving on, we have a color called beat mark. And once again, this will be used when we're drawing the staff, and we have lines representing, we'll have visual indicators representing where the beats occur.
Right.
And this will be the color that we'll draw those beat markers with. All right, we'll have another one called beat mark measure, and this will be a brighter variant of beat mark, which will be placed on the start of every given measure.
Okay.
So that way we'll actually be able to visually see where measures begin and end.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on from here, we have start mark. And this is another indicator. It will be drawn similar to a beat mark. It will be used to indicate where the song starts at, generally the first note of the song. All right, moving on from here, we have a hit line. And this will be kind of like, I don't want to say goal line, it'll be the point at which you have to hit the notes. If you remember back to the music demo when we had drawn that vertical stripe all the way across the screen to show where the notes were going to be played, this will be the playback equivalent here for our game.
Sure. Yeah.
This will simply be a vertical indicator to say that this is the point at which notes will either play or need to be hit. Alright, next up we have the field edit grid. And edit grid will be used later on when we establish the game's edit mode, and it'll be used for just the color to draw our snapping grid. And one last value will be edit cursor. And edit cursor will be a visual indicator of where our on-screen cursor is.
Oh, sure. When we're in edit mode, it'll be the cursor we use to place notes on the staff.
Exactly. And we went over by one.
Are you sure?
And yeah,
Okay.
we'll put in these fields. Yeah, and that'll round everything off.
Now, I did want to mention this. If you were coding this on your own, you didn't have a training video to follow, you normally would not be expected to know every single type of text that you'd want to color here. We've already kind of gone through the game and done a lot of research and development to teach you how to build this. So we're already familiar with that. Just in case there's any curiosity, somebody watching at this point going, well, how do I know which fields to put in? You won't. In a lot of cases, if you're coding a project like this completely on your own, you're going to be adding stuff in as you need it.
Exactly. The idea here is that these names are going to need to be referenced in a few different places. They'll appear first in the style configuration file, but then they'll need to appear as a field later in something that the game will use to address. And then it'll have to appear in some loading code to get the field initialized.
Right.
And the idea is that throughout the creation of the game, this will allow us to avoid having to go to 3 different places every time we need to add a setting.
Exactly.
Here, we'll just get all the loading code put together all up front, and then when we need any individual setting, all we have to do is set it in the original configuration and move on.
The only reason I bring it up is just in case you're watching these videos and you're kind of sort of following along where you're making a game that is maybe loosely based on our drum game, but it's your own creation, and you're sitting here at a complete and total loss for what nodes you're going to create inside your XML. Don't stress about it. That's going to come to you as you get deeper into your game development. Now, if you sat down with pencil and paper and you've drawn out where all the different text is going to go, you may already have a different idea, and you could go from there. I just wanted to let everybody know, if you're doing something on your own, you don't have to know all of these beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. If you're doing your own thing, grab maybe just a handful. Do like a background and a text color.
Yeah, do some basics, and then just build on from there as you need more stuff.
All right. Well, since we've got colors rounded out, let's move over to positions. And these will, again, just be various elements that will be placed on certain screens inside of the game, and they'll need locational settings. So let's drop in the first of these, and that's going to be a node called beats per minute, or BPM. We'll use the same layout we have been so far, where we make an attribute called value, and we'll set that to a good default value. I'll set it to 1 by 1, so X and Y will be set to 1.
It's the upper left corner.
And it's the upper left corner, but 1 pixel off from what a vector 2 type normally defaults to, which is 0 by 0.
Gotcha.
The idea here is that visually, it'll jump up to the top left corner if we forget to set it. But as we're testing the loading code for style, we can watch the values jump from 0 to 1 to indicate that we're properly loading all of the settings.
Just a random curiosity. Is it going to place that text based on which corner of the text box? Like if the text was enclosed in a bounding box, which corner of that bounding box is going to be at 1-1?
It all depends on how you use the sprite batch drawString call.
Okay.
By default, if you use one of the more simplistic overloads, of course, you're going to be drawing from the top left corner of the text.
Okay, so I'll just stuff everything literally up in the upper left corner off by 1 pixel.
And if you delve into it a little deeper and use the origin, then you can center align it and so on. That is a good point to bring up, and that is the positioning we'll use will always be based on the top left corner of the text.
Okay.
Here in the style configuration, we're not actually going to be specifying any centering information.
Mm-hmm.
So every time we specify one of these locations, whenever it is describing text, you'll think of the text as having a top left corner, and that's the point that we're actually positioning.
Okay.
All right, let's use the BPM node as our template node to copy and duplicate for the remaining positional nodes.
Yeah, we might
Let
as
me
well.
glance here real quick and see we've got probably 6 more of these. And now we can address the remaining positions. Next up will be the main menu. And main menu is simply going to be a list of options.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to give that a position on the screen, especially for vertical offset.
Okay.
The idea here is that the actual main menu series of items isn't going to take up the entire screen.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on, like let's say you're making an alternate skin for your game, you could actually put the entire menu more towards the left side of the screen, or maybe on the bottom of the screen.
Sure, to maybe accommodate a different texture layout.
Exactly, because now with the screen's background, you'd be free to draw out a box or a border or any type of graphical enhancement, so that way you could look like the text is part of the graphics, but really you're just making sure that positions line up. All right, moving on, we have song select. And this is going to be used on the song selection screen. It's just the list of songs that will be shown on that screen.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next we've got score players, and we've got score select. And on the score screen, we're going to have the individual player's score and the selection, because there will be a menu on the score screen that will allow you to replay or to jump all the way back to the beginning and go to the song list.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be able to position these two things separately.
Okay.
All right, now we've got the pause menu. And that is simply to say, when we pause the game, where do the pause selection items get drawn? And then finally we have our save prompt. And the reason that pause menu and save prompt have positional settings is, as far as the interactive elements, only the text is interactive.
Mm-hmm.
But when we draw the backgrounds for these screens, we can actually draw boxes or containers for the text. Again,
It'd be like an invisible container you can position around.
Well, you just envision the text as an invisible container. You're
Okay.
just drawing a visible container to complement the text.
Okay.
And just making sure that you can cause the two things to line up.
I see.
And with that now that we've got our colors and our positions laid out, that takes care of our style XML file.
All right, well, let's go ahead and stop the video here, and we'll move on with the remaining parts of the system in the next video.